Rolling.
Okay. This is the story of Frank Schreckenberg, a fine Christian man and his family who live in Faribault, Minnesota. Grew up with the family here, and it's October 18th, 2007, and we've had rain for many days here. But now that we scheduled this, the clouds are parting and sunshine's liable to be with us any moment. It's October 18th, 2007, and we're at 930 Highway 60 East. This is where the Schreckenbergs have been for many years. And Jeff Jarvis is our cameraman, and he's going to be recording the escapades and life of Frank. And can I get a picture of you with that? No.
Sorry.
Yeah. Okay.
I think we'll pan over to Frank right now.
Okay.
This is the fellow. This is Frank. He's the man of the hour.
Yeah.
Being that it's only an hour, we've got about 60 minutes of filming time here. Hi, Frank.
Okay. Really, the reason why I'm disconnected, I just took my son out to the hospital, and I hope that helicopter doesn't mean they're coming for him.
I see.
Worries me. What do you want me to say?
Okay. Let's come over here.
You know,
So you talk about women again, or hearing
no,
aid?
my hearing aid.
Oh, okay.
We're going to use this Model T. This is a 1918 Model T. Is that right, Frank?
Yeah, it's a 1918 that I found it out in Eklund out here back in 1958. And it was, see that rust down there? That's clean compared to where the car looked. It was solid rust from one end to another. It was in an open feeder shed from 1932 to 1958 when I bought it.
Wow.
And Todd's story on the reason why I bought it is this, that my wife was pregnant with him, and she told me to get a different hobby. That's his story.
Well, the metaphor is that we're at the front end of this Model T, and here's the crank. This is the starter. And so this is starting our interview, and we'll end up at the exhaust there later on in the hour. And right now we're going inside to look at some pictures and get the story.
Back into Minnesota maintenance.
Now they're
Famous for years for wheel horse.
The vines over there are kind of covered up in Minnesota maintenance.
Right over here we have what's left of Minnesota maintenance, covered up by the vinage. Let's just go indoors here with Frank and Roy.
Born and lived out your childhood, and something about your folks and being in Germany and coming over here.
Go ahead.
Okay, well, there's not much to say. My dad and mother had a 5-acre truck garden farm in West St. Paul.
Do you want to show us here on this?
And it's right, there's a section that goes down into 40 acres into St. Paul, and we lived right about 6 blocks from there. At that time, West St. Paul didn't have storm sewers, and all our water, anything we put in the street, septic tanks and everything else, went down into St. Paul. But I can remember my dad at city council said he couldn't pump his septic tank into the street anymore, and he went down there with his sauerkraut hanging out of his ears. He says, "Well, what you think?" He says, you should tell me how to pump the water uphill," he says. And at the time I was a little embarrassed, but I thought that was kind of cute now.
Frank, how about your parents being in Germany and coming to Virginia? Could you fill us in on that story?
Yeah, that was kind of a sad deal. My dad had a aunt in Alexandria, Virginia, and she paid my mother and dad passage to come over here during the, after their wedding. And when they got here, they found out they were indentured slaves. And that was 1901. And my dad put money into this underground movement that would allow people to go back to the old country again. Well, the call came one night when my brother was 3 years old, and he was sick with the measles. And so anyway, they had to go. And he was so sick on the boat that when he got over in Germany, all the relatives over there wouldn't have nothing to do with him because he was sick with the German measles. They said it was American disease now, it was German measles. But anyway, he did die in Germany, and then my dad and mother had three more children when they came over in 1909. And at that time, they settled up in St. Paul. In fact, they were down on Water Street, where that's all washed out there now, underneath the high bridge. That's all been. And but then he later ended up in West St. Paul.
Can you show us on the map here, Frank? Hold that up and show us where your farm was and where you went to school.
Yeah, our farm was right here on Arion Street, and when they first came over, they came in down below here along the river, Plateau Boulevard now.
Plateau?
Yeah. And so my dad was the type of guy that didn't believe in banks too much. And what he did was he kept saving money and ending up building a house with that money. Well, what he didn't realize that every time he took a house and a half acre, he was cutting his farm off. So first thing you know, when I came along, we only had about 2.5 acres, but he was German, and he farmed like a German. And we had apple trees up above, plum trees down below there, raspberries, and then carrots and onions in between the rows.
Frank, what a memory!
So he still had 5 acres of land, even on 2 acres. And you couldn't farm it with anything. I mean, you had to do everything with a hoe and a fork.
Frank, tell us about that horse.
Oh, goes back. He bought a Model T in '22, and but anyway, he had bought a real nice horse. He had one before that wasn't doing the work, and he had a real nice horse he found, and he bought it. So Saturday, he went on the egg route into St. Paul, and he got down the end of his route down on Stryker, Dodd Road, and he grabbed a case of eggs. There's 12 dozen eggs in that case, you know, and there's probably half of them were in there yet. And he grabbed the case, and the horse took off, went home. My dad had 4 miles to walk, and so the next Saturday, same story. As soon as he turned the horse around on the end of the street there and grabbed his case of eggs, no sooner got the case of eggs out, and the horse took off with the buggy. And so he met the guy, and he says, "What happened? What's wrong with this horse?" And he said, "Why? What's wrong?" He said, "Well, when I deliver my eggs and I turn the buggy around and grab the case of eggs, the horse runs home, and I got to walk 4 miles." And he said, "I forgot to tell you, it's an old fire horse. When the fire's over," he says, "you just hang on, because all you're going to get is tail." And my dad, of course, telling that with sauerkraut coming out of his ears, you know, was a lot funnier. But he was a good man. He worked hard all his life, and he taught me good principles.
How about your mom? What kind of a lady was she?
My mother was an orphan in Germany. I have no record of her whatsoever. The Schreckenberg name goes back to 1600. And by the way, if you translate Schreckenberg into English, it's Frightened Hill. So now you know there's only 300 Schreckenbergs, because who wants to be called Frightened Hill all his life? But no, she was in an orphanage over in Germany, and she told us some pretty hard, tough times in those days. And I don't know how my mother and dad met, but they got married, and I got a big picture, their wedding picture and everything up there. My dad must have been making pretty good money at that time to spend that kind of money. But anyway, they ended up in Alexandria, Virginia, indentured slaves. I have no record of that passage coming across. I have no record at all. The second time, yes, they were in Amsterdam. I know what size the ship was, and when they left and when they came here. And
Frank, how about your siblings? Can you tell us about your brothers and sisters?
well, my dad and mother had 6 girls and 2 boys, and somehow he timed them so he always had three of us home work on a farm. And of course I was the youngest one, and my mother was 48 years old when I was born, which is really unusual in those days. And my dad was 50. My grandfather was 60 when my dad was born, so I had no uncles or aunts or anything like that. When I was over in Germany in 1946, occupation troop, I did visit some of my cousins over there, and I had one aunt at that time, and she couldn't get out of the English zone in time, and I only had a 3-day pass, so I never met her.
Let's see.
And but you see, when my grandpa was 60 years old, and my dad was born, they removed all relatives, you know. But I did have a real nice visit with my cousins over there, and I asked him, I says, how did you German people let Hitler do this to you? And he says, did your mom and dad have a new wash machine in '33? Well, yeah, I think my mother got a new washboard. And he said, we had those. He said, your dad have a new car? No. We bought a 22 Model T Roadster and made a truck out of it. We used that on our farm. I got a model of that up there. And so anyway, then he said, we had all those things going for us. And I said, well, what happened? He said, they confiscated our guns.
There's a lesson there.
He says, in fact, they had broke down a hall wall because it sounded like it was hollow and they could have hidden them behind there, you know. And he says, after that, we heard things we didn't like. In fact, we didn't even want to believe them, you know, the things that were going on over there. And he says that after that, he says, we couldn't do nothing. We had to go along. And I got to believe that they were just as, not sticking up for the German people. They did some terrible things over there, and I saw some of it. I was stationed not too far from Dachau. But the people treated us GIs with open arms. I mean, they were just, I mean, you would never do this over there now, today, in Iraq.
Frank, what about growing up and going to school and getting caught doing a few pranks here and there?
Me? You know, I think back and my kids are telling me things that they did and they got by with, but I think the only thing I ever did, I broke an arc light one time with a rock. And but no, you know, during the war, you grew up and things were different.
Did you like school?
I went to Dodd School. Dodd School isn't there anymore. And that's right on the Dodd Road comes into Rice County.
Would that be how many grades in the school?
That was 6th grade.
6th grade.
And well, it took me 2 grades to learn how to spell my name, but then I had to tie my shoestrings too yet. So, but that kind of held me back a little bit. But they didn't hold me back anyway. But I went to 6th grade. There, 5th grade, I was asked to be a school patrol. I thought that was just really something because I was a little kid. I mean, I can show you some pictures. I hung around with kids always a foot taller than me, so they could protect me.
Sure.
But then the next year, the 6th grade, I was captain. Wow.
Captain of the patrol.
I wanted to be a policeman, but I was always too short. But I did have some police officers in West St. Paul that I really admired, and they were just friendly with us.
Were they Irish or different backgrounds?
Isn't that awful? I can't think of this one. Bert Coyle, he was my favorite. So I don't know what nationality he was, but he was my favorite. I had told my dad that one of the kids had got in trouble up there, and they put him in jail. And about a week later, Bert Coyle comes by, and my dad says, of course, he didn't believe the story. He says, the policeman, he says, and we didn't call them cops, neither. They were policemen. And he says, I understand you had a little trouble at Dodge School. And Bert Coyle said, what trouble was that? Well, I understand you had to put, my dad said, I understand you had to put somebody in jail. And he kind of looked at me and he winked at me, and I was standing behind my dad. I think that taught me not to tell a lie. he was, I thought that was really the high point right there.
You want to give us the names of your brothers and sisters, you know, from oldest to youngest? And
Well, the oldest one is Teresa, and she married, oh, that's another story. My dad was really upset when I came back from Germany and I didn't marry a Fraulein and bring a Fraulein over, because my oldest sister married a Frenchman, the next one married a Polish person, next one married an Englishman, another Polish person, another Englishman, and I married a Swede. And that didn't go over too good with my dad. But no, my oldest sister was Teresa, and she had 2 children that were older than I was. And Donald was the oldest one. He's 5 years old, older than I, and I made him call me Uncle Frank. But he's gone. And Vernon was the next one. He was 9 months older than I was, and he's gone. Helen was 9 months younger than I was, and she's gone. Mm-hmm. And Marlene is the only one left from that family. And
where is she, Frank?
she lives up up by Isle, Minnesota,
Okay.
and then goes down to Texas in the wintertime. And then the next one was Mary. Mary had 2 boys, Jim and Eddie. Eddie was always our little pest. Jim was 3 years younger than I, and he ended up with leukemia and passed away when I was 16 years old. And he and I were really buddies. I got some pictures of him there too. Mm-hmm. And then and Eddie, I just went to his 50th anniversary. Gee, that makes you feel old. But anyway, let's see now. Ann had a boy and 2 girls, and they're all living yet. The girl had done history of our family, and she did a real good job. Went way back to 1600, and you saw that picture with the car and the boy. That was her younger son, Dennis, and he was born the day I left for Germany after. And then let's see, Mary, Pauline, she had 2 girls, and they're both gone. Gee, ooh, I think I'm on the next number here. And then Marge, she adopted 2 children, a brother and a sister, and California. And I don't want to tell you about that story.
Was she the youngest of the kids then?
Yeah, she was 5 years younger than I was, older than I am. And then finally, my mother and dad had a boy. And of course, I was always told I was spoiled, you know, and I really wasn't, because we were poor, and we didn't know we were poor. I mean, you stop to think, making a living on a 2-acre truck garden farm.
With that big a family?
Yeah. Well,
How many were in your family total?
7.
Okay.
Actually 8. One of my sisters that was born over in Germany died when she came to St. Paul.
So it was actually
That was
10
Helen.
with your folks.
But, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I went to Sibley Junior High School. And I had a 9th grade teacher that I had in 6th grade, Miss Kruger. She was strict. And here I come into 9th grade and I got her again. I said, oh no. And anyway, she did one of the most wonderful things for me. She told me she didn't say I was too dumb to go to high school, but she saw something in me that I had a mechanical aptitude, and she suggested that I go to a vocational school. Well, that was great. And I later found out they used it more or less like a reform schools. You couldn't teach them anything else, teach them a trade, you know. But 175 kids would start, and only 35 would graduate.
Is that right?
Yeah.
In the vocational program?
And I think the 35 were the success story of those kids.
Well, you're one of them, Frank.
Yeah, well, more or less. But from there, I went in the Army, drafted on August 4th.
Hey, Frank, before we get into that, let's talk a little bit about your first car and that cute girl, that Catherine, sparking by Mounds View Park.
Yeah. My first car was a 1926 Model T touring car. And I guess I've been in love with, besides Catherine, the Model T. That may not come out right, but anyway, I had a 26 Model T, and then before I went into the service, I went and sold that and to a friend of mine, and he commenced to total it. So I know that's not around anymore. But then my dad had bought a 31 Nash with 5,750 miles on it. It had the original Goodyear tires, which all blew out during the tire regime. And then I bought a Model A coupe. Boy, that was a hard jump from a Model A coupe to from the 31 Nash I had. And then I went in the Army. We sold a Nash for more than what we paid for it 5 years later. So I mean that was, of course, in those days nothing. Those days that wasn't hard to do because cars are hard to find. The car that this 40 Plymouth that's out in the yard there right now, I paid $10.95 for that in 47. It sold for 800 new in 40. So cars were really hard to find. And I duplicated. This is a different car, but it's the exact same model and everything.
I see.
And
So Frank, there's a very important picture right here. I want you to explain about Catherine and those children. That's
Well,
a
this is,
turning point in your life.
this is Catherine now. If you would look at her, you'd think she's about 18, 20 years old. But she was 14 years old, and she was teaching Sunday school up there at Salem Lutheran in West St. Paul. And this is I have a hard time talking. I don't know what I would have been if I had met her. She was a wonderful person.
Good mother. She
Yeah.
could run this office.
We grew up together. I mean, you might say she was 12, 13 years old when I met her, and I was 15. And thank God my kids didn't do that. And we were in business together. And there was this time when we built our house in 1948 that she worked at Humboldt High School. She was a bookkeeper, so I had my live-in bookkeeper, so that worked out pretty good. And she handled the books just fantastically until she started having strokes. And Todd and I both admit that we didn't know what was going on in the bookkeeping department, and that was, well, nothing could have done about it. We didn't know. And so we had some hard times after that.
Frank, can you tell us about your work experiences in the electrical field and 3M and Northwest Airlines?
Well, I think I probably should go before that. Is when I was 15 years old, my brother-in-law was head orderly at the Miller Hospital. And he asked me if I wanted to go to work at the Miller Hospital. Yeah. So I handled carrying the mail up in the flowers and running the elevator. In those days, you ran the elevator, you leveled it mechanically, you know. And I did that, and I brought up the food carts. I learned a little thing about the 5th floor. That was a maternity ward. I'll never forget that. This woman, she was just swearing at her husband. What is going on here? And of course, I was a dumb kid off the farm. I didn't know what it was all about. And so I learned that lesson. But,
Why exactly was she yelling at him?
pardon?
Why exactly was she yelling at him?
Because she was having a baby, and she's going into a lot of pain, and she's
Oh, it was
blaming her
It
husband.
was his fault, yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, I worked there until I got a job at Speedometer Service down in Seven Corners in St. Paul. And I should have realized then there wasn't that much money in electric motor repair, because first thing you know, Speedometer sold out to D&B, Dave and Bob, and they were two alcoholics. And here I am, 16 years old, running the shop. One guy'd come back and he'd be upset, and he'd go out on the drunk for a week, and he'd come back and they'd get in a big fight, and the other guy'd take off. There I was running the shop at 16 years old. And finally, they sold out to Felix Johnson Electric, and so I went to work for Felix Johnson, and then I was drafted from there. When I came back, I worked for Commonwealth Electric, because Felix couldn't use another man, although he was supposed to bring their employees back again. But I went to Commonwealth Electric, but prior to that, when I was a kid, I got a job at Minnesota Mining, and this gentleman I was working with, he says, "Didn't your brother-in-law get you this job?" And I says, "Yeah." "Well, how come you got the worst job in the plant?" That was my brother-in-law. And I said, "Well, we'll take care of that." In those days, if you worked 40 hours, you got froze to the job. You couldn't leave during the war. And I worked 39 hours, and I went down to Northwest Airlines, and I went to work for Northwest, and I worked on the B-24s. I was when they came in the Northwest Airlines down there, Holman Field, right?
Holman Field, right? Yeah. St. Paul.
I cut the belly turret out for putting a turret in the bottom, because I was the smallest guy there, you know, and I could squeeze in there pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
And I worked there, and I was almost ready to quit school, but a lady by the name of Betty Hinkle, she talked me out of going back to school again to finish at vocational. Problem with vocational, you would get a vocational diploma, but you still didn't have a high school diploma.
Is that right?
So you had mechanic arts was right across the street, so I had to take classes at night for English and history, and in order to get the.
So you've got two diplomas then?
Yeah, actually, yeah. Mm-hmm. And then besides that, I went to Dunwoody twice. My kids call it Dumwoody, but I went to Dunwoody twice for armature repair or rewinding. That's quite a trade in itself, winding an armature. I haven't done one of them for a long time, but I think I could.
Can we stop at this point just for a moment?
Sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, point out the names of the kids there. And
Oh, sure. I remember them. This is Bruce. Oops, I'm getting on the sun here. This is Bruce there. That's Cindy, that's my oldest. Bruce is the second oldest, and that Todd is my third. And then that's Paula, and then that's Bobby. And Andrea is always crying. She's our retarded child. And but she can't speak, but she lets you know what she needs. And this is Missy, our youngest one. She's a school teacher here in Faribault.
yeah, I see her over to Roosevelt School.
And Cindy is working down at Daniel. She's a
Cindy Kubish.
yeah,
Goldsmith, is that her?
and she's a goldsmith.
Mm-hmm.
And Bruce is a carpenter. He does beautiful carpenter work. And Todd is a person we're having trouble with right now with cancer. And Bobby, she has a child. She lives over in the center. A little boy that's just a real sweetheart. And Paula has 3 girls.
Is Bobby with Erickson?
No, they got divorced.
Oh, sorry to hear that.
Yeah,
That
she
happens.
married a fishing buddy. They used to go to Mille Lacs all the time. But I don't know if there's anything.
Is there any of St. Paul or your family
Yeah.
up there?
I think these are all individual. Don't mean a whole lot. And I guess there's not much of anything, just a lot. Yeah, how about,
Let's take
We got
a-
these army pictures here, Frank. I think
Well-
we've been-
These are quite nice.